Even so, there remain two problems inordinately difficult for this system of anarchy with spontaneous defense. First is the problem of defending those who are noticeably defenseless. This can be reduced by advanced technology to people who are quadriplegic morons, assuming that won't be solved by sufficient technology, and very young children who require constant attention anyway. Then there are those who for a brief time go defenseless, and the even rarer cases of those who are overwhelmed by violence initiators wishing to test their skills against a probably weaker foe. The last is most rare simply because of the high risk and low material return on investment. Those who need not and should not be defended are those who consciously choose not to be pacifists. Lefebvre and his disciples need never fear some libertarian will use methods they find repugnant to defend them. Perhaps they can wear a dove button for quick recognition. Far more important is what to do with the violence initiator after defense. The case in which one's property is violated successfully and one is not there to protect it comes readily to mind. And finally, though actually a special case of the above, is the possibility of fraud and other forms of contract violation. The Mises Rothbard position that fraud and failure to fulfill contract, the latter may be taken care of by clauses in the contract, of course, is itself theft of future goods. The basis of contract is the transfer of present goods, consideration here and now, for future goods, consideration there and then. All theft is violence initiation. Force is used to take property away involuntarily or to prevent receipt of goods or payment for goods freely transferred by agreement. These cases may be settled by the primitive shootout, or socially, that is, through the intervention of a third party who has no vested interest in either of the two parties to the dispute. This case is the fundamental problem of society. Society, as Mises points out, exists because of the advantages of division of labor. By specializing in different steps of production, individuals find total wealth produced greater than by their individual efforts. Any attempts to force a solution against the wishes of both parties violates libertarian principle. So a shootout involving no risk to third parties is acceptable, but hardly profitable or efficient, or even civilized, aesthetically pleasing, save to a few cultists. The solution then requires a judge, fair witness, or arbitrator. Once an arbitrator to a dispute or judge of an aggression has performed judgment and communicated the decision, enforcement may be required. Pacifists may choose arbitration without enforcement, by the way. The following market system has been proposed by Rothbard, Linda and Morris Tannehill, and others. It need not be definitive and may be improved by advances in theory and technology, as this author has already done. At this stage of history, it seems optimal and is presented here as the beginning working model. First, always leaving out those who choose not to participate, one insures oneself against aggression or theft. One can even assign a value to one's life in case of murder or inadvertent manslaughter, which may range from the taking of the violence initiator's life, taking replaceable organs, technology willing, to restore the victim's life, to paying a foundation to continue one's life's work. What is crucial here is that the victim assigns the value to his life, body, and property before the mishap. Exchangeable goods may simply be replaced at market rate. See below. A finds property missing and reports it to insurance company IA. IA investigates, either through another division or through a separate detective agency D. IA promptly replaces the object to A so that loss of use of the good is minimized. At this point, we must introduce Mises' concept of time preference. Future goods are always discounted relative to present goods because of the use time foregone. While individual valuations of time preference vary, those with high time preference can borrow from those with lower time preference, since the high preferers will pay more to the low preferers than the value they have foregone. The point where all these transactions of time preference clear on the market defines the basic or originary rate of interest for all loans and capital investment. D now may fail to discover the missing property. In that case, the loss to IA is covered by the premiums paid for the insurance. Note well that in order to keep premiums low and competitive, IA has a strong incentive to maximize retrieval of stolen or lost goods. One could wax eloquent for volumes on the lack of such incentive for monopoly detective systems such as state police forces and their horrendous social cost. If D does discover the goods, say in B's possession, and B freely returns them, perhaps induced by reward, the case is closed. Only if B claims property right in the object also claimed by A does conflict arise. B retains insurance company IB, which may perform its own independent investigation and convince IA that D erred. Failing that, IA and IB are now in conflict. At this point, the standard objections to market anarchy have been brought up that the war between A and B has been enlarged to include large insurance companies, which may have sizable protection divisions or contracts with protection companies, PA and PB. But wherein lies the incentive for IA and IB to use violence and destroy not only its competitors' assets, but surely at least some of its own? They have even less incentive in a market society long established. The companies have specialists and capital tied up in defense. Any company investing in offense would become highly suspect and surely lose customers in a predominantly libertarian society, which is what is under discussion. Very cheaply and profitably, IA and IB can simply pay an arbitration company to settle the dispute, presenting their respective claims and evidence. If B has rightful claim, IA drops the case, taking its small loss compared to war, and has excellent incentive to improve its investigation. If A has rightful claim, the reverse is now true for IB. Only at this point, when the matter has been fully contested, investigated, and judged, and still B refuses to relinquish the stolen property, would violence occur. B may have only been bothered so far as being notified of IB's defense on B's behalf, and B may have chosen to ignore it. No subpoena could be issued until after conviction. But PB and IB step aside, and B must now face a competent, efficient team of specialists in recovery of stolen property. Even if B is near mad in his resistance at this point, he would probably be neutralized with minimum fuss by a market agency eager for a good public image and more customers, including B himself someday. Above all, PA must act so as not to invade anyone else or harm the property of others. B or IB is now liable for restoration. This can be divided into three parts: restitution, time preference, and apprehension. Restitution is the return of the original good or its market equivalent. This could be applied even to parts of the human body or the value set on one's life. Time preference is the restitution for the time use lost and is easily determined by the market rate of interest which IA had to pay immediately to restore A's property. Apprehension is the sum of the cost of investigation, detection, arbitration, and enforcement. Note well how the market works to give B a high incentive to restore the loot quickly to minimize apprehension cost, exactly the opposite to most statist systems, and to minimize interest accrued. Finally, note all the built-in incentives for swift, efficient justice and restoration with a minimum of fuss and violence. Contrast this with all other systems in operation. Note as well that, in parts, all the system has been tried successfully throughout history. Only the whole is new and exclusive to libertarian theory.